Welcome to the Marvelous Middle-Age Podcast, where we are building a community of people who are in the midst of midlife, sharing our stories and learning from each other along the way. Each week, I'll have a guest join me to discuss a topic that impacts our lives and touches on some aspect of midlife. We'll discuss relationships, transitions, health and well-being, parenting, careers, and more. My goal is to encourage and support you and help you thrive as you navigate this adventure of midlife. Join me here each week for the Marvelous Middle-Age Podcast. Amy Wicks, welcome to the Marvelous Middle-Age Podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me, Nicole. I'm excited, and I just love the title of your podcast because I'm definitely middle-aged, and I need to be reminded that this too can be marvelous.
It can. And as you know, we were talking, marvelous middle age is absolutely the truth. There's so many great things about being in this season of life. There's some challenges, some tough stuff
Yeah,
as well,
for
as
sure.
we all know, but there are so many great things, and it's nice to be reminded of that sometimes. And so I appreciate that very, very much. And I appreciate you and the fact that you are taking time out with your busy schedule to speak with me because I've been looking forward to this conversation for a
Yes.
while and just can't wait to dive into it. But before we do that, could you introduce yourself to the listeners? Just share about yourself and your family and what you do.
Yes. Well, my name is Amy Wicks, and I've been host of the Simply Wholehearted Podcast for 8 years, which is hard to believe. But primarily, my main titles are wife and mom to 3 teenagers, one that is officially launched, and 2 more not far behind. And then a fur baby that is forever my shadow
Oh, I
pup.
love the fur
And
baby.
so,
Yes.
yes. But I love helping women experience clarity and breakthrough in places they've felt overwhelmed, maybe a lot of self-doubt and possibly even fear and anxiety, and help women find that breakthrough. And then also I love really hosting a community of like-minded, like-hearted coaches who
Mhm.
love to do the same. And so I'm in a beautiful season of getting to see some of my work multiply in spheres that I could never impact. And I when it's really hard, I just have to remind myself every once in a while, step back and look at what God has done and just celebrate it and take it all in, even at like this middle age, the good and the hard, because there is always both.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, I know, and I think that's a great reminder that when times are tough, when things are difficult or just not even difficult, but just a little extra busy, it's nice to take that pause, right? And step back
Yes,
and say, "Wow, there were days I was praying for this, and now it's here, and I'm
100%.
so happy." And
Right?
again, not that it's, perfect every day, but yet gosh, look at what you've done. And I do have to say your podcast is wonderful. I've been listening
Thank
and
you.
it is so good. I will link it in the show notes. I was telling Amy before we started recording, I was listening to your December 30th episode with Terry Power about a wholehearted new year. And I was driving, of course, as I do a lot when I'm listening to different podcasts. And
Same.
I had this thought, like, I need to stop because I need to start writing some of these things down. I can't, this is just going to go in. I need to re-listen to that episode. If you haven't checked it out, I'll link it specifically too, because it's just some great ideas and thoughts and ways that we can plan
Mm,
for the new year without it feeling like another thing we have to do, and why it's so important
yeah.
to have a good
Yeah.
start to the
Well, I
new year.
loved that conversation. And Terry, in fact, is she's brilliant in helping people plan and goal set and form habits. So she's going to offer a bonus for a summit that I'm having here in March. It's a Wholehearted Abundance Summit. And she's going to talk specifically about flex weeks and really purposeful productivity, which it's going to be so powerful. Like undoubtedly you're going to want to watch that session, listen to that session. There'll be both options available, and she'll have notes this time available for that. It's going to be good. It's really going to go like one step deeper from our podcast conversation and get really practical. So anyway,
Oh, I
she's a
love
blast.
we will link that because again, I just found so much good in that one episode that I'm like, I've got to get this down on paper so I can go through and do some of those things. I absolutely love that. Well, thank you so much for that. We are meeting really for the first time today. Facebook.
Yes.
We're over Zoom, but meeting each other. I recently completed my Enneagram coaching certification, and on a video that
Woohoo!
Beth and Jeff McCord shared during my training, you were on it with some other coaches sharing about things that you've done as a coach and an Enneagram coach, and I was just so inspired by the things that you shared, and so I reached out, and you were gracious enough to agree to be on the podcast. This past season has been wonderful because we've talked about the Enneagram, what the Enneagram is, why it's so powerful. We've talked to folks of different types on the Enneagram. All 9 types were featured in this season. And so this episode, I really just wanted people to learn from you and your experience with the Enneagram, with your coaching and other things. So how did you first learn about the Enneagram and what interested you about it?
I always like to tell the funny story that when I first heard the word and heard about this new personality test, that it was an Enneagram, as in the name Annie. And it was because one of my favorite podcasters of all time, Annie F. Downs, was talking about it. So I was somewhat early adopter to podcasts, thanks to my husband and my love for talk radio. So when she brought up this new personality quiz, my ears perked up because I'd grown up in a home that talked about personality types. I remember in the 90s, my parents went to a pastoral conference and came back with this Gary Smalley animal personality thing. And, someone was an otter, a beaver, golden retriever, a lion, so that had been a framework from my teenage years, and quickly was introduced to DISC test when I launched and worked for a church, Myers-Briggs soon after, and all the other ones that you can think of, Big Five and spiritual gifts. And there's so many wonderful assessments out there that give one more detail about how we're uniquely and wonderfully made. And Enneagram was absolutely one of those, but it was also the first time that I thought, oh, here's a tool that could maybe bring transformation, because it's not just telling me what I do, but why I do it. And I felt like just after my years of spiritual training and work in spiritual formation and ministry, that this was a tool that could expedite that process in some ways by getting to the heart of the matter faster. And so I was loving it for myself, wishing I had had it sooner, especially my early years of marriage and before I became a mom, because suddenly all the things that I had struggled with throughout the years were making sense. And also, terrible on one hand, and then wonderful in the other, because it wasn't a license, but it was an understanding of, oh, that's how I see the world. And while also giving me the gift of compassion and understanding that other people saw the world differently. So there's so much there, but that was part of my first introduction, and why, for me, Enneagram has become a primary tool in my practice, personally, but in the tools that I use for coaching individuals and teams. And I love to equip others with too, because it does help us with a lot of the work.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Well, I also learned of the Enneagram for the first time from Annie F. Downs as well on her podcast,
Love it.
podcast.
Yes.
And so very similar to you, I also desperately wish I would have had this when I was marrying my husband and before I had my son, because it explains so much.
So
It gives
much,
me the
right?
language to articulate why,
Yeah.
why do I do the things I do? And my gosh, and that's the power, I feel like, of the Enneagram, is that it really gets deeper into the motivation. It's not just the behavior itself. We all do lots of things, but
Right.
that why. And that is the power. And absolutely love that. So we have kind of a similar, yeah, I've listened to Annie for a long time. Her podcast is really, really, really good. I
Yes.
understand it. You're a 7, I believe.
Yes,
7.
I
Okay.
mistyped though. I thought I was a 2 or a 3, and I got my certification in 2018.
Mhm.
I I counted a blessing. I think I was one of the first because Beth McCord and I had talked for my podcast, and we've been in conversation and said that, hey, if you ever start a certification program or you teach others how to use it, I want to learn. I want to do that. And
Mm.
not too long after that, she came out with some training
Yeah.
to coach coaches and get help coaches get certified.
Mhm.
And so anyway, but it was through that certification process and diving deeper that was one of the many things that I discovered. Oh, I'm really a 7. And there's
Yeah.
some stress in my life too, that when I started following the stress lines a little clearer, I was like, oh yeah, no, that one is loud and clear.
Mhm. And that's funny you say that because am a 2 for sure. No doubt about it. But there was a point in time I thought I might be a 6.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
the reason I know I'm a 2 is because when I go down my stress path, that 8 comes out and
Yes.
it is like, whoa,
Right.
so it's funny. I tell people that a lot when I'm talking about typing, helping them, kind of guiding them as they're figuring out their type. I'm like, sometimes look at where the number you go to and stress,
Yes.
look at the unhealthy traits of that type. Sometimes that'll even tell you, but I think, I'm, fairly new to this, but I think sevens can mistype as a 3. My sister is a 7, and she has a good friend who's a 3, and they're similar in a lot of different areas.
Yes.
They present
Yeah.
very similarly. Again, motivations for all that are completely different, but 7s and
Hmm.
3s, I think a lot of times will, show
Yeah, they look
show
very
each other.
similar.
Mhm.
And especially when you start diving down communication patterns and the stances, well, the Enneagram calls them stances. And I like to refer them as our communication pattern because that's our everyday language.
Right.
But the 3, 7, and 8 share that same assertive or aggressive stance. And it can make the experience the same. Obviously, underlying core emotions, but it's even the thought that you and I both have a podcast and we both love doing the podcast, and we even have some shared similar motivations regarding it, but going a little deeper, it that's where the differences come in, and you can even add subtypes into what those differences
Oh,
look
yeah.
like,
For
which
sure.
is, we won't nerd out that much today,
No.
but when you get into that, it's like, oh yeah, we do the same thing, so it could look similar,
Mhm.
but our underlying reasons why, that's an indicator.
Right. Yes, absolutely. I love it, and I love how it's so, layered, because I think I've heard people
Yeah.
say, "Well, what? So I'm just this one type, and that's kind of the little box I'm in." I'm like, "Oh, no, 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 no. Let me nerd," like you said, nerd out, because I will nerd out if someone wants me to, but I'm like, "Oh, no. There is so much more to this," and I'm looking forward to, as I start coaching my clients, sharing the more, right? Because we can
Yes.
talk about your type, your primary type all day long, but unless
Yep.
you get into some of the other layers, it doesn't give you that fully well-rounded, embodied picture of who you are and who, God created you to be. So I love that you
Yes.
mentioned that note because it's so true. You mentioned, really getting into the coaching and locking in the 7, which I think was great. How do you feel about being a 7? I tell my sister all the time, everybody needs a 7 in their life. Like we even thought about putting that on a t-shirt. Like everybody needs a 7 because my sister's a 7 and she is one of the most
Mhm.
7 sevens I've ever known in my life. But what do you like about being a 7? And then on the other side of that, what's kind of challenging about it?
Well, it's so funny because when I read the stereotypical things about a 7, I go, am I really that? And I have dear friends who've said the same kind thing of like, we need more 7 in our life. And I I admittedly, and it might be the middle age piece or post, motherhood, I don't feel like I'm this quintessential 7 that I want to be. And but I do think that one of my superpowers is the gift of reframing to a positive light. Now, that can encompass a couple of types there, so I'll give that caveat, but I think that the 7 specifically combines their head type, and so their strategy and making connections that others don't always see with that positive outlook of, let's see the hope, let's see the possibility, let's see the good. So I think the 7, and I do think of fun things like anything that's difficult in my life, I purposely pair with something fun. So it's more doable. And I've taught my kids the same. And I know that what I love about what my kids have said about me is that, Mom, you were always spontaneous and that you did a lot of fun things with us. So that's one of the griefs of middle age and launching kids, because they don't always want to do their fun thing with me. So I've had to grieve that part. And then that's would be the sad thing or the hard thing of being a 7 is having language or having a narration of like, oh yeah, I go after fun, and fun is not always accessible or the next exciting thing, next interest, or, possibility, or sometimes you just go through long seasons of hard.
Yeah.
And you have to just do the hard thing. And there's not always a way to pair it with this fun thing. So that's the downside, because that can just like, sometimes the hard can feel extra hard, where I think one of, 2 of my best friends, one's at 4, one's an 8. I feel like they navigate their harder times with a little bit more grace and like acceptance, whereas I'm like fighting through it of like, no,
Oh,
this can't be hard. We
no,
must change this soon.
right. I am
So
not feeling any emotional pain in this moment. I don't care what I have to
yes,
do.
don't take me there. Don't
No,
take me there.
don't make me do that. Yeah, my sister has said exactly the same thing. She is also going to be an empty nester after this year. My nephew is graduating from high school, and her daughter is already, launched. And she said, "Yeah, my kids are the people I've done my fun stuff with, and I'm having to figure
Yes.
out." Her and her husband have very different interests, and so she's like, "I'm figuring out how to do some things by myself."
Yeah.
I don't have a
Yep.
crew to bring along with me and people to get excited about what I wanna do, and she said there's a little
Yeah.
bit of pain in that. It's a little
Oh,
tough,
for sure. For sure.
to face that, but she's also excited too for other reasons as well, so
Mhm.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, like I said, I know other 7s, and yeah, 7s are great. We all need a 7 in our life, for sure. So you, from the early days, were interacting with Beth, McCord. When when did you decide to become an Enneagram coach, and why was that something you wanted to pursue for yourself?
Yeah. And I think it kind of ties all the stories together I've shared so far, which I experienced personal transformation, even as a mistyping, by having this lens of the uniqueness and the diversity of personalities, understanding that there was an underlying core motivation, fear, weakness that could be articulated and could be found even like in print, right? In black and white. I found joy in talking about it and inviting people maybe who would stay at a surface level with me, inviting them to go deeper, thanks to, people would talk Enneagram at the dinner table or at the dinner party. And
Yeah.
so it became a way to connect with people easily and a bridge, I think, in a lot of ways. And so, as I mentioned, I was so grateful when Beth, I think I want to say it was like number 30 something, where
Mhm.
she was willing to be on the podcast. And that was a big deal to me as a new podcaster, probably my first year. And was just so honored. And at that time had just said, hey, by the way, if you ever help others learn about this tool, I am in it to win it. And so I jumped on the opportunity as soon as that presented itself. And I'm just so grateful. I ended up doing all of the certifications, marriage and family, EIP, the ongoing education piece that they offered to their coaches, because I I could see that this tool was something that could be explored probably for a lifetime at some level. And there would always be a new aspect to find, especially since there are so many different various shades of each type. And I have found that to be true as I've had the honor and the privilege of working really with hundreds of of women primarily, and some men in group settings, and business situations. But I've learned something new with every person that I've worked with about the tool, about the combination of types, about life experience, with that lens of that type, combinations in marriage, relationships, work relationships. So yeah, it's been really fascinating and helpful. And I've gone, I use other tools and other resources. But the Enneagram has just, especially as I've worked with it and combined it with my years of ministry training and spiritual direction experience and other therapy tools that I've accessed over the years, it's just, I don't know, a shortcut or expedited ability to really experience change and transformation in the places that most of us find ourselves stuck in at one point or another in life. And just it's maybe a little bit of a shoehorn to get dislodged, if you will, from some of our stuck places. And yeah, so Enneagram is just really, since I discovered, it's like, oh, yeah, this is a tool to use and has been beneficial in so many ways.
Yeah. And as you said before, there's lots of great tools out there, right? I mean, there's all
Yes.
kinds of things that you can do. And a lot of folks have asked me, why the Enneagram, Nicole? Why this one? And all I can say is that for me personally, it has been so impactful to me and my own personal development and growth as a person, but also in other facets of my life in a way that I just feel like I need everyone to know about this tool
Yeah,
because it's been so impactful and I've seen it impact other people in their lives. It can impact your relationships, the way you parent, your marriage, friendships, and beyond, professional relationships.
absolutely.
My sister uses it with her team and her business, and just having that understanding of other human beings gives you so much compassion for them. And
Mm,
also, with you mentioned to the communication piece, learning how to communicate with people who are different than you are, or
yeah,
even the same type. Because as you mentioned, even those of us that are, ones or twos or threes or fours, we aren't just carbon copies of each other. We all have
yeah,
uniqueness. We all have different things about ourselves. And so, yeah, it's such a powerful tool. And as you said, you've seen it in practice with all these clients that you've coached and teams you've worked with. And you can say with certainty, like, this is powerful and it can really
yeah.
create transformational change for sure. So I love that so much. It's great. It's just great. So you've talked about those clients and the the practice that you have. And I know you mentioned too that you are also doing coaching of coaches. Um, how has all of that impacted your your practices? Is it something that like how are your clients and your coaches that you're working with expressing the value of that for you as you're coaching them along? What have they shared that's been really helpful for them as you've coached them in their journey?
Yeah. That's a great question.
A big question, I know. It's like, where do I start? How many ways has it helped people? Like a million ways.
Yeah, yeah. But no, I love that you're asking it from that framework, because while every testimony is unique and individual to the person and maybe where they needed help getting unstuck or the unique transitional stage that they were in. But ultimately, I've loved it as having this tool to help me connect better to their story and their unique need. Because how I'm going to coach a 3 and how I'm going to coach a 9 looks very different, almost opposite, right? I tend to bring up that one because that tends to be an opposite, and yet there's connection, right? As you and I know, stress of lines of stress and growth. But similarly, that's where someone coaching maybe you and I on growing our podcast or something like that,
Mhm.
having an understanding of how a 2 thinks and feels versus a 7, there would be unique input and strategy and even coaching technique that someone would employ. And so similar, I've heard again and again from people about Amy just got me. She understood exactly where I was. And I think that's two parts because, and I want to make sure I know I've mentioned, like, faith is a primary tool, is the primary tool. It's without Christ, transformation is not lasting. I will just put it out there.
Yeah.
Some transformation is possible if you grit and don't quit. But will it be lasting? You'll get exhausted and you will weary out. And so ultimately Christ brings the transformation. But as people have gone through the process, I know that the Holy Spirit has helped me speak into their life, but I also have this wealth of information to know how they process, how they think, how they feel. And instead of giving the kind of advice that I would need, I can literally walk a mile in their shoes and help come along with them as a guide by the side to guide them on their unique path, not the kind of path I need or what my other client needed, but what they uniquely needed. And so it just is a more personalized, I think, tender, kind, compassionate approach that the tool and really the Enneagram coaching process can offer. So I think that would be an overarching theme for as I hear back and hear feedback.
Yes, I agree with that completely. I have also seen that play out. I will have people ask me, they know their members types, and they'll say, "Well, I need to give them their performance review. How might I speak to an 8?
Yes,
That's how I'm
exactly.
gonna, speak to a 3." And I'm like, "Okay, we need to definitely, 8s, just be direct.
Yep.
Don't." I'm married to an 8, so I know this. I get him
You understand.
10 minutes, and if I don't spit out whatever I'm trying to say, he's like, "Okay, come on, come on, come on." I'm waving my hand in the air like, "Come on." So there's different techniques, like you said, different coaching approaches based on the
Yes.
type. It's very personalized, and you're absolutely right. It helps you truly see the transformation that you can have, again, with absolutely faith and Christ at work there, because without him,
Yep.
it's not possible. But also it gives you another tool and in your toolbox, another way to help yourself, whether it's getting unstuck or moving through a transitional period or starting something new or whatever the case may be. So it's so, so powerful. And yeah, I just can't say enough about it as a tool. Uh, and again, I can only imagine as a coach for as long as you've been one, just all the things that you've seen in the stories and the change and the cool things that have happened. So that is,
It's been really neat. Yeah. And if people would ever want to hear more, I've done several series just like you did.
mhm,
But I had clients share their stories,
mhm,
and we call them their wholehearted transformation journey.
mhm,
But each type shares their unique experience, and that might give some insight to people what to expect, or even hearing their story and their ahas might kind of provide some self-coaching opportunity.
mm,
So anyway, that's always that is a resource I like to share wherever you are in your Enneagram exploration to
mhm.
figure out what type sometimes, but then also to hear, oh, what can this really do for me? Like
Right,
what's possible?
right.
What can is there really an experience to be had
Mhm.
just because of this tool?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. I appreciate you sharing that because I do think that is a question that a lot of people have is, okay, so I know my type. Now what? What is this going to do for me?
Exactly.
And oh my gosh, if I could just sit down with them and say, oh, let me just show you the different
Yeah.
things that can be possible or things you can learn about yourself or others in your life or whatever the case may be. There's just so much there. And I appreciate you mentioning the podcast episodes with the different types because again, I think that hearing someone speak to their experience is very powerful. It really is encouraging and powerful, and it gives someone something to say, "Oh wow, okay, I see myself in that and I'm going to, you know, learn from that and also hopefully carry some of that, into my life." So I think that is amazing. That is great. You also, as you mentioned, host a podcast, Simply Wholehearted. Can you share a little bit about your podcast and how you mentioned how you've incorporated Enneagram into that? But just, I'd love for you to talk about your podcast because I've been listening to episodes and I've just fallen in love with it. So please share if you
You're
don't
so
mind.
kind.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
great.
thank
It's a
you.
great
Well,
podcast.
genuinely, thank you for listening. It
Yeah.
means so much to me. I, you know, I'll at least maybe start with this fun little story is truly the whole Simply Wholehearted idea began because I felt just led, inspired, or just like compelled probably is the best word because it was a strong sensation that I was supposed to attend a business conference called Business Boutique. And it was in its first iteration of it, Christy Wright, who worked under Dave Ramsey. She's now her own, own
Oh,
person, own entity. And again, I mentioned that I loved listening to talk radio. And there was actually a childhood dream of mine to be a radio host, which like here I am. I kind of really
love
did
it. You
it in
are.
a
Yes,
way. Yeah, who
you
knew?
are doing
Yeah.
it in just a little different flavor, which I love. That is fantastic.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, in the 90s, we didn't have podcasts. So
No.
anyway, all of that to say, in 2000, I think it was 2016 or end of 2015, I went to the Business Boutique Conference and um, got to see Annie F. Downs, hear Christy Wright talking about building a business. And I went for one reason, which because I was doing a party home business type of thing.
Mhm.
But while I was there, I instead filled my notebook, which I still have, with all of these ideas about building a business, sharing the news of intentional living. And part of my plan, my business plan, was to host conversations with women who were doing the work and who were living that life and how do they do it and have these conversations to inspire others. And so it's just really fun because that version of me couldn't have imagined that I would have had the guts to like I think in less than a year later start publishing a podcast, which
Oh
was
my God.
crazy, and then much
Love it.
less 8 years later still have a
Mm.
weekly podcast and the privilege to get to have conversations with really amazing people that I don't think I would have otherwise connected with ever.
Oh
So
my
it feels like
God,
a real
I
honor.
love it. I love that so much. Isn't it just amazing how there are these moments, right? There's these pivotal moments that you thought, well, I'm just going to go to this conference because I want to build my home business that I'm doing and I want to, and then you go and yeah, I mean that is I call it a glimmer, like a God glimmer,
Yes.
whatever anyone wants to put language to it, just him, probably had his hand on your shoulder and was saying, "You,
Mm.
this is where you need to be right now because you're going to hear this message that is going to take you places that you never maybe thought you would ever go." And then just to look back at all these years of podcasting and coaching and all the cool things that you've been doing, that's great. It serves as a reminder to me because as I'm sure you can attest to as a podcaster, there's times when you're like, "Oh my gosh, how am I gonna, fit this episode recording in or how am I going to, and yet it's so personally satisfying and
Yeah,
wonderful to get to
fulfilling.
connect with people and
Yes.
do this and all that kind of thing. And so I just hearing your story and how this came. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Back in the 90s, we did not have podcasts. We did not have
Mm-mm.
really we were just even getting into the internet back in the 90s.
Yes.
We could go
No,
back and
yeah.
talk about our different resources that we had to do.
Right.
Like thinking about that the other day, I thought, gosh, what if we didn't have, what if we didn't have some of these cool ways to communicate with each other? And podcasting, I think, is just such a fun way to whether it's educational or informational or entertainment, just such a great way to communicate with people that maybe you otherwise wouldn't be,
Oh, yeah.
communicating with. So yeah, it's a fun medium to do that. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I feel very grateful and blessed to get to do it, and we'll see what the Lord does with it.
Right, absolutely, right. I know. I always think about, you'll see this on different things, God has plans for your life that we're not even imagining yet. We haven't
Mhm.
even entered our brain yet of all the amazing things that he can do in our lives. And yeah, I mean, your story certainly is a test to that because uh gosh, 8 years later, and here you are. That's awesome. That's wonderful. I love it. And you're on a video on Beth McCord's elite Enneagram coaching
Training.
certification, and you get this email from this person who's like, "I saw you on a video. Can you please be on my podcast?" Yeah, it
Oh,
happens,
I love it.
right? It happens.
Yes.
That's great. Well, Amy, I just appreciate you being on and sharing your
Yes.
story, sharing how the Enneagram has impacted you personally, but also informed your coaching practice and your podcast, and just sharing your journey with all of that. I appreciate it so much. I will link to your website and your podcast and all the things we talked about today in the show notes. So if anyone's listening and want to check it out a little more, check out what Amy is up to. The show notes will be there. So definitely check it out. Thank you so much, Amy, for being on today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Nicole. I've had a blast. It was certainly a joy and a lot of fun to do.
Thank you. If you're enjoying the podcast, please follow the show to make sure the latest episode is on your podcast feed each week. I would greatly appreciate a rating and a 5-star review on the podcast platform you're listening on. It helps others to find the show. If there are topics you'd like me to discuss on the show, please email me at themarvelousmiddleagepodcast@gmail.com or direct message me on Instagram at Nicole Stute. Thank you for listening.